I want to follow up on a series of things, and so I'm going to ask you to cooperate with me in terms of how much I want to get in here. So let me start off with you, including my dear friend from Virginia's very often refrain that aren't we better off under the JPOA? And I think there's a follow-on question to that, and I want to ask that in a moment. I want to read from something you said, Mr. Albright. I just want to make sure you haven't changed your mind on it. You're referencing the question of the nuclear fuel that was increased by 20%. And you went on to say, and I quote, based on the IAEA's reporting to member states, the problems in making enriched uranium oxide were apparent by the fall of 2014. But the administration decided not to make a major issue about the lack of oxide production. And you go on to say, and I quote, concluding that Iran has met the Joint Plan of Action condition to convert to oxide newly enriched up to 5% is incorrect. In this case, the potential violation refers to Iran not producing the enriched oxide at the end of the initial 6-month period of the Joint Plan of Action and again after its first extension. The choosing of a weaker condition, which must be met, cannot be a good precedent for interpreting more important provisions in a final deal. Moreover, it tends to confirm the view of critics that future violations of a long-term deal will be downplayed for the sake of generating or maintaining support for the deal. And finally, it says the administration relied on a technical remedy that Iran has not demonstrated it could carry out. Is that still your view? So we basically have a violation of the agreement. For some of us, it's not insignificant. It seems to get explained away, and it sets a dangerous precedent from my perspective of what we're looking at as we try to build confidence in whatever final agreement that takes place. And when we are relying on technical remedies that Iran has not been able to show can be successfully used in order to meet the verification and the reductions that we want, we're in trouble. Let me ask you something else. With reference to the possible military dimensions, you said, and I quote, whenever confronted with Iranian intransigence, they fold. It's going to be hard for a lot of people to support this deal if they give in on past military dimensions. Addressing the IAEA's concerns about the military dimensions of Iran's nuclear programs is fundamental to any long-term agreement. An agreement that sidesteps the military issues would risk being unverifiable. Moreover, the world would not be so concerned if Iran had never conducted weaponization activities aimed at building a nuclear weapon. Is that still your view?
Yeah, I think the part on the fold, I'm sorry. The part on the fold, I mean, I said that right after Secretary Kerry had made his comment.
Yeah.
The administration came to me subsequently and said that they had not changed their position.
I know.
But the rest
I'm trying to figure out what the position is.
Yeah, no, the rest of what I said, I agree.
Now, someone else, the former Deputy Director General of the IAEA, Oli Hunanan, said, without addressing those questions, the possible military dimensions, the IAEA Secretariat would not be able to come to a conclusion that all nuclear material in Iran is in peaceful use, which is essential in building confidence of the international community over Iran's nuclear program. A comprehensive deal can only be reached if uncertainties over Iran's military and nuclear capability are credibly addressed. This should be an unambiguous condition to achieving a final accord that is meaningful in safeguard terms. Now, this is was the number two at the institution that we are overwhelmingly relying, if we have an agreement, to largely do the verification and the ultimate determination on the question of possible military dimensions. Dr. Takia, is that something that you would agree with, his assertion?
I'll make sure to do that. As I mentioned in my testimony, Senator Menendez, I think the resolution of the PMD issue is indispensable to the viability and credibility of this agreement.
Now, let me ask you something. I was taken back when I read in the interim framework agreement that as it relates to Iran, they would implement the modified Code 3.1 to its existing IAEA safeguards agreements, in essence, the additional protocol. However, as with the additional protocol, Iran may only be required to abide by, as opposed to ratifying the additional protocol. To me, that's problematic, since Iran is the only NPT signatory to have suspended these measures in the past. Should we accept an agreement in which Iran is not required to ratify the modified code or the additional protocol?
I thought they would be required to ratify. I thought that
That's what we thought, but if you read so far, it says that they will abide by it. And so should a final agreement not say that they must ratify it?
No, I would think ratify. I mean, that needs to be checked. I mean,
How about
it's a
you, Dr. Taki?
good question.
My understanding is that one of their deputy negotiator, Abbas Araghchi, has said that compliance to additional protocol, I think he was talking about that, and Code 3.1 is a conjunction of that, would only come about if there is ratification. Now, if there is no ratification, then I guess they go back to their fallback position of adherence pending ratification. Now, I don't have a whip count in the Iranian parliament. I can't tell you if they're going to ratify it or not, but the full compliance would have to be with the ratification.
And compliance means, for us, should mean ratification as well, should it not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, let me go to my esteemed colleague's questions. He's asked a good question, but about are we better off now with JPOA than where we were? The question for me is, what are we going to be better off with in the long term? And in that respect, I look at a letter that was just released by 5 former members of President Obama's inner circle of Iran advisors, who wrote to him, and they said, quote, precisely because Iran will be left as a nuclear threshold state and has clearly preserved the option of becoming a nuclear weapon state, the United States must go on record now that it is committed to using all means necessary, including military force, to prevent this. Is it not essential for us to be able to make it clear that even after the expiration of the agreement with Iran, that we would not permit it to possess enough nuclear fuel to make a single weapon?
I think it's very important. I mean, I think I still call it the JPA, so forgive me, but there's a clause in there that the nuclear program should be judged as under criteria of practical need. And I think it's been lost in this whole negotiation, but I think it's fundamental. Iran doesn't need a centrifuge program, doesn't need it today. It's very unlikely to need it 15 years from now. If it can demonstrate that it needs it, then okay. But if not, then that program should not be accepted, and the U.S. should be clear that it should not be accepted.
Mr. Chairman, can I have one final question? So this is what I'm concerned about, is where we're headed on all of these elements as to any final agreement, and then we can make the judgment, are we truly better off? I probably wouldn't dispute with my colleague that in the interim, to the extent that we have started forward progress, we're better off. It's bought us time. But by the same token, what is the long term? Because several witnesses have come before the committee and basically said, look, we're not solving the problem. We are delaying the problem at the end of the day. And that's, aspirational that the regime is going to change its mind over the next decade and move in a totally different direction. My last concern, in January of 2014, the U.S. government's Defense Science Board issued a remarkably frank report entitled Assessment of Nuclear Monitoring and Verification Technologies. And their conclusion was pretty shocking to me. They concluded that the U.S. government tools are either inadequate or, more often, do not exist for a list of current challenges that read like the challenges that will be posed by an agreement with Iran. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to read that report, but is it your professional experience that we have the capacity now to deal with all of the elements of what is envisioned in an Iran agreement to make sure?
I think there's always limitations in intelligence. If you look at many proliferation cases, I mean, you just can't depend on intelligence for timely detection. And that's, in fact, why people in this country, around the world, invest so much in the IAEA. in a sense, they're the boots on the ground, and you want to empower them and to get the information that can then detect a violation. And they've proven that ability over and over again. And I think in this deal, they're critical. Certainly, they work synergistically with member states' intelligence agencies, and the intelligence agencies benefit tremendously from the results of the IA. But I think you cannot depend on intelligence to verify this deal. I mean, I think the U.S. intelligence has done a remarkably good job in discovering secret programs in Iran. I think the IA was able to use that information gained in some cases from Iranian defector groups in order to, on the ground, press Iran really hard to reveal secret activities and in that sense stop them, where the intelligence information was incomplete but had no power really to stop the Iranian movement forward on their nuclear program. But the IA, confronting them on one lie after another in 2003, was a very powerful tool. And so you do need them fully empowered, verifying this deal.
Well, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if we're going to have any more briefings along the way, but I would commend to your attention this Defense Science Board. It's about a year old. Maybe a lot's changed in a year, but if you read the report, it leaves you with real concerns about what our abilities are to do a lot of what we are expecting in any framework agreement. Thank you for the courtesy.
Thank you, and thanks for your very good questions and certainly years of focus on Iran's nuclear program.